The Apache warrior shared one night of passion with the young black woman, and years later he returned to find her. But as the weathered brave crests the dusty ridge overlooking the settlement, his dark eyes search not just for the seamstress who haunts his dreams, but for the truth of what their single stormy encounter left behind. The townspeople see her as nothing more than useful hands and quiet submission, a woman destined to fade into the margins of their world, forgotten and alone. Yet the warrior carries ancient knowledge and skills that could either protect or destroy everything she's built in his absence. Between them lies a secret that could bridge two worlds or ignite a war. A child whose mixed blood makes him both their greatest hope and most dangerous vulnerability. Will his return unite them as the family they were meant to be? Or will the forces of hatred tear apart the fragile life she's sacrificed everything to protect? Before we continue, comment where you are tuning in from. Perhaps we will publish a story there. The needle pierced the fabric with practiced precision as Mariah Clemens worked alone in her cramped seamstress shop. The afternoon sun filtered through dusty windows, casting long shadows across bolts of cloth that represented her entire livelihood. Outside, the town of Copper Ridge bustled with activity that rarely included her. Mrs. Henderson entered without greeting, dropping a torn dress on the counter. She examined Mariah's work with critical eyes before stating her price. The amount was half what any other seamstress would charge. Mariah accepted without protest. Survival required swallowing pride. The bell chimed as Mrs. Sheriff Bracken filled the doorway next, his weathered face stern. He surveyed the shop like he was searching for evidence of wrongdoing. His visits had become more frequent lately, each one accompanied by suspicious glances and unspoken accusations. Victoria Ashford, the town's most influential woman, swept in after the sheriff departed. She spoke to Mariah with the measured politeness reserved for necessary but undesirable revealing features that grew more distinct with each passing month. Mariah scooped him into her arms, feeling his solid warmth against her chest. At 3 years old, Samuel possessed an intelligence that both amazed and terrified her. His questions about the world beyond their cabin grew more complex daily. His curiosity about his appearance compared to hers had begun in earnest. Inside the cabin, Samuel played with carved wooden animals while Mariah prepared their modest dinner. The toys had appeared mysteriously over the years, crafted by unknown hands with remarkable skill. She suspected their origin, but had never confirmed her theory. Thunder rumbled in the distance, triggering memories Mariah had tried to bury. 3 years ago, a storm much like this one had changed everything. She had been alone then, truly alone, struggling to survive her first winter in Copper Ridge. The knock on her door that night had startled her. The Apache warrior who stood on her threshold had been soaked to the bone, his dark eyes holding exhaustion and something deeper. Despite her fear, she had let him inside. What happened during those storm-tossed hours had been unexpected, profound, and brief. By dawn, he had vanished like smoke, leaving only the memory of his touch and the scent of sage on her skin. Months later, when Samuel's existence became undeniable, Mariah had made her choice. She would raise him alone, protecting him from a world that would see his mixed heritage as either weakness or threat. The story she told townspeople was simple. Samuel was an orphaned child she occasionally cared for, nothing more. The deception grew harder to maintain as Samuel developed features that clearly marked his Apache bloodline. His cheekbones sharpened with each month. His hair grew thick and straight. His skin carried the warm tone that spoke of desert ancestry. Samuel looked up from his toys, studying his mother's face with unsettling perception. He asked questions about his father with increasing frequency. Mariah deflected with gentle words. Her mind raced. The land grabber had seen too much, understood too much. Her careful balance was beginning to crumble. The next morning brought fresh challenges. In town, conversations stopped when she approached. Eyes followed her movements with new suspicion. Someone had been spreading stories about her unusual living situation. Samuel's presence could no longer be hidden. The choice before her was stark. She could continue the impossible deception until it collapsed around them, or she could find another way to protect her son. Neither option offered security. As the sun set over Copper Ridge, casting the desert in shades of gold and crimson, a figure appeared on the distant ridge. The silhouette was familiar, yet impossible. Mariah's breath caught in her throat as recognition dawned. The Apache warrior had returned, drawn by forces neither of them fully understood. His presence would either save them or destroy the fragile life she had built through 3 years of careful lies and desperate love. Ayanna descended from the ridge as the sun painted the desert in deep purples and golds. 3 years of wandering had brought him back to this place, though he could not explain the force that drew him here. His Apache training had taught him to trust instincts that spoke louder than logic. The small cabin looked exactly as he remembered it. Smoke curled from the chimney. A vegetable garden stretched along the eastern side, well tended and thriving. But something was different. Children's toys scattered near the front steps caught his attention. Mariah emerged from the cabin carrying a water bucket. She moved with the same quiet grace that had captivated him during that storm-filled night. Her hair was longer now, braided practically against her neck. She had grown stronger, more confident in her movements. A small figure followed her outside. The child could not have been more than 3 years old, but his features struck Ayanna like lightning. Dark hair fell straight across the boy's forehead. Had never seen anyone who looked like him before. The warrior's face held the same angular features Samuel saw in his own reflection. Recognition flickered in the child's expression, though he could not understand its meaning. Mariah stepped protectively in front of Samuel, her body tense with 3 years of guarded secrets. She had imagined this moment countless times, but reality felt more overwhelming than any scenario she had prepared for. The warrior, who had vanished without explanation, now stood before the son he had never known existed. Ayanna stopped several feet away, respecting the distance she created. His eyes moved between mother and child, absorbing the life they had built together. The garden showed careful cultivation. The cabin displayed improvements made by skilled hands. Samuel's clean clothes and healthy appearance spoke of devoted care. The boy stepped around his mother's protective stance. His natural curiosity overcame caution as he approached the mysterious visitor. Ayanna knelt to meet Samuel at eye level, his warrior's composure shaken by the profound connection he felt with this small person. Samuel reached out tentatively, his fingers tracing the beadwork on Ayanna's leather vest. The intricate patterns told stories of Apache tradition, passed down through generations. The child seemed to recognize something ancestral in the designs, though he had never seen their like before. Mariah watched the interaction with conflicted emotions. Relief warred with anger. Hope battled with fear. The man who had abandoned her now showed gentle patience with their son. His presence answered Samuel's unspoken questions about his heritage, while threatening the careful balance she had maintained. Ayanna spoke softly in Apache, testing whether the child might recognize the language of his father's people. Samuel tilted his head, listening intently to sounds that felt familiar despite being foreign. The rhythm of the words seemed to resonate in his bones. His choice clear. He would not disappear again. The wandering that had defined his adult life now seemed purposeless compared to the family he had found. His tribal obligations felt distant against the immediate reality of his son's needs. Samuel began to grow tired, his small body finally succumbing to the excitement of the day. Mariah lifted him in her arms, feeling his weight settle against her shoulder. The child looked back at Ayanna with sleepy contentment, as if the warrior's presence completed something that had always been missing. The three of them stood in the gathering twilight, bound by forces stronger than time or circumstance. The future stretched before them, uncertain, but no longer solitary. Samuel's quiet breathing marked the rhythm of their newfound family, fragile but undeniably real. Ayanna understood that his return had changed everything for all of them. The life Mariah had carefully constructed would need to expand to include him. The secrets she had protected would require new strategies. The love that had brought them together must now prove strong enough to weather whatever challenges lay ahead. Dawn brought new challenges to the small cabin by Red Creek. Samuel woke with a fever that sent panic through Mariah's heart. His small body burned with heat that seemed to come from nowhere. His breathing grew labored as the morning progressed. Mariah applied cool cloths to Samuel's forehead, while her mind raced through possible remedies. She had treated fevers before, but nothing had prepared her for watching her own child suffer. Her hands shook as she measured water and checked his temperature repeatedly. Ayanna knelt beside the bed, his warrior's composure masking deep concern. He recognized the signs of desert fever, a condition that claimed many children if not treated properly. His grandmother had been the tribe's healer, and her knowledge lived within his memory. The town doctor would never come to treat a child of mixed heritage in Mariah's questionable household. Social barriers that seemed manageable during healthy times became deadly obstacles during using techniques passed down through generations. Mariah watched him work, seeing skills she had never witnessed before. His knowledge of healing plants rivaled any trained physician. The gentle precision with which he handled each preparation spoke of deep understanding and years of observation under expert guidance. Samuel's condition worsened as the afternoon wore on. His fever peaked at dangerous levels that threatened permanent damage. Mariah and Ayanna worked in perfect synchronization, combining her practical care with his traditional medicine. Neither approach alone would have been sufficient. The child's breathing stabilized first. Then his fever began its slow retreat from critical temperatures. By evening, color had returned to Samuel's cheeks. His eyes opened with renewed clarity, focusing on both parents who had refused to leave his side throughout the crisis. Ayanna prepared strengthening broths, using recipes his people had relied upon for centuries. The combination of specific herbs and roots would restore Samuel's energy, while protecting against fever's return. Each ingredient served multiple purposes in the healing process. Mariah fed their son carefully measured spoonfuls of the traditional medicine. Samuel accepted the unfamiliar tastes without complaint, instinctively trusting remedies that carried his father's heritage. The connection between them had deepened through shared survival of the crisis. As Samuel recovered, Mariah realized how completely she had come to depend on Ayanna's presence. Their partnership during the emergency felt natural and right. The barriers she had maintained around her heart began to crumble under the weight of shared purpose and genuine affection. Ayanna understood that his feelings had evolved beyond simple obligation to his child. Mariah's strength during the crisis revealed character that matched her beauty. Her devotion to Samuel showed the kind of loyalty his warrior's heart recognized and valued above all else. The three of them spent the recovery days learning to function as a family unit. Samuel delighted in having both parents available to answer his endless questions. Uncomfortable intensity, noting features that clearly indicated Apache ancestry. His questions grew more pointed as he probed for inconsistencies in Mariah's explanation. Ayanna remained silent during the interrogation, understanding that his words might worsen their situation. His presence alone violated unspoken social boundaries. Speaking might trigger more serious consequences for the family he was trying to protect. Samuel clung to his mother's skirts, sensing danger in the sheriff's harsh tone and aggressive posture. The child's obvious fear tugged at something unexpected in Bracken's weathered heart. He had children of his own, and Samuel's innocence was impossible to ignore. The sheriff departed without making arrests, but his warnings carried clear threats. He would be watching their situation closely. Any trouble involving the Apache would bring swift justice. The message was unmistakable and terrifying. Victoria Ashford arrived shortly after Bracken's departure, drawn by curiosity about the sheriff's visit. Her sharp eyes missed nothing as she surveyed the domestic scene. The truth about Samuel's parentage became obvious to her experienced observation. Rather than express outrage or disgust, Victoria surprised them all with unexpected support. Her own struggles as a widow had taught her to value strength over convention. She saw genuine love binding this unlikely family together, and her conscience would not allow her to condemn what appeared to be working well for everyone involved. The crisis had united them, but external pressures were mounting. Their happiness felt fragile against the weight of social disapproval and legal threats. The question now was whether their love could survive the storms gathering on the horizon. Jebediah Morse arrived at the cabin 3 days later with renewed confidence and barely concealed threats. His discovery of Samuel's obvious Apache heritage had given him powerful leverage over Mariah. The land he coveted now seemed within his grasp through intimidation and social pressure. Morse made his position clear with promises to return soon for her answer. Mariah searched desperately through her papers and possessions. There had to be something she could use to protect them. Her deed to the property seemed solid, but legal documents meant nothing if the entire community turned against them. Her fingers found irregularities in the paper that had never seemed important before. The boundaries described in the legal language did not quite match the actual layout of her land. Dates appeared to have been altered. Signatures looked suspiciously similar despite representing different officials. Ayanna studied the deed with growing interest when Mariah showed him her discoveries. His knowledge of tribal territories revealed that her property sat on land that had been Apache hunting grounds within living memory. The forced relocation of his people had happened only 15 years earlier, making any legitimate sale questionable. Sheriff Bracken appeared at the cabin that evening, but his demeanor had changed. Instead of suspicion and threats, he carried an air of uncomfortable duty. His investigation into Morse's business practices had revealed a pattern of questionable land acquisitions throughout the territory. The sheriff's inquiry into property records had uncovered systematic fraud spanning several years. Morse had been using forged documents and bribed officials to steal land from both settlers and tribal territories. Multiple families had lost their homes through elaborate schemes disguised as legitimate business transactions. Mariah's deed was just one piece of evidence in a larger criminal enterprise. Her property had indeed been taken illegally from Apache territory, but Morse had never held legitimate claim to sell it to anyone. The entire transaction had been built on fraudulent foundations from the beginning. Bracken's investigation revealed that Morse owned virtually nothing through honest means. His empire had been constructed through systematic theft and legal manipulation. The evidence was overwhelming, but prosecuting such crimes required cooperation from victims who were often too intimidated to come forward. Samuel's mixed heritage suddenly transformed from liability into legal asset. Settlers who remembered violent conflicts from earlier decades. However, Victoria also brought unexpected support from families who had suffered under Morse's predatory business practices. His reputation for fairness had been carefully constructed facade, hiding years of systematic exploitation. Some townspeople were ready to stand against him if given leadership and courage. The revelation about fraudulent land deals created opportunity for justice, but it also escalated the danger facing Mariah's family. Morse would not surrender his criminal empire without fighting back through any means necessary. His desperation made him more dangerous than ever before. Ayanna prepared for the confrontation he knew was coming. His warrior training had taught him to recognize when peaceful solutions became impossible. Morse's type would choose violence before accepting defeat, especially when cornered by evidence of widespread criminal activity. Samuel seemed to sense the tension building around their small family. He stayed closer to both parents, his natural curiosity subdued by instinctive awareness of approaching danger. The child who had never known fear was beginning to understand that some threats could not be overcome through love alone. Mariah spent sleepless nights planning strategies that might protect her son while exposing the truth about Morse's crimes. Her seamstress work had taught her patience and attention to detail. These skills now served in preparing legal documents and coordinating with other victims of land fraud. The evidence against Morse continued mounting as more families came forward with similar stories. Pattern recognition revealed the scope of his criminal operations across multiple territories. Sheriff Bracken found himself investigating the largest fraud case of his career. But Morse was not waiting passively for justice to destroy him. His network of corrupt associates began mobilizing to eliminate the threats to their profitable schemes. The family by Red Creek had become the primary obstacle to continued criminal success. The power shift was complete, but victory remained uncertain. Truth and justice provided powerful weapons, but Morse controlled resources and connections that could prove decisive in any final story. Morse crafted for public consumption painted Ayanna as the advance scout for a larger Apache uprising. He claimed inside knowledge of tribal plans to reclaim their former territories through violence. The mixed-blood child represented proof that infiltration had already begun through seduction and deception. Several townspeople who remembered conflicts from earlier decades listened to these warnings with growing alarm. Old fears ran deep in frontier communities, where survival had often depended on viewing outsiders as threats. Morse exploited these anxieties with calculated precision. Sheriff Bracken found himself caught between mounting evidence of Morse's crimes and community pressure to arrest the Apache warrior before violence erupted. His badge carried responsibility to uphold law and maintain peace, but these duties seemed increasingly contradictory as tensions escalated. Victoria Ashford worked tirelessly to counter Morse's propaganda with facts about the land fraud investigation. Her social position gave weight to her words, but fear proved stronger than reason for many settlers. The community split between those seeking justice and those demanding immediate action against perceived threats. Mariah refused to let Ayanna handle the situation through traditional warrior methods. Violence would only confirm the accusations being spread against him, while putting Samuel at greater risk. Her strategic mind insisted that truth and legal process offered their only path to real victory. The plan she developed required perfect timing and cooperation from multiple parties. Evidence had to be presented publicly before Morse could silence his accusers. Sheriff Bracken needed support from honest citizens who would stand for justice despite social pressure. Samuel became an unwitting symbol in the larger conflict swirling around their family. His innocent presence at his mother's side during daily activities demonstrated the peaceful reality behind Morse's inflammatory rhetoric. The child's obvious happiness and health contradicted claims about dangerous infiltration. Ayanna's restraint in the face of mounting provocations impressed even his critics. His calm presented themselves as truth incarnate against Morse's fiction. Sheriff Bracken called for order as tensions filled the crowded space. His decision to allow evidence presentation rather than immediate arrests showed courage that surprised both supporters and critics. The lawman chose justice over expedience despite personal and professional risks. Victoria Ashford stood to address the assembly, her voice carrying the authority of long community leadership. She presented documented proof of systematic land fraud that had victimized numerous families over several years. Names, dates, and amounts created undeniable pattern of criminal behavior. Morse attempted to redirect attention back to the supposed Apache threat, but his arguments fell apart under scrutiny of actual evidence. Multiple families confirmed their experiences with fraudulent land deals. The scope of his criminal enterprise became impossible to deny or minimize. Samuel sat quietly on his mother's lap throughout the proceedings, his presence serving as living reminder of what was truly at stake. The child represented hope for a future where different peoples could coexist peacefully, rather than fear and hatred dividing communities along racial lines. Ayanna spoke only when directly questioned, his words measured and respectful. His knowledge of tribal law and territorial history provided context that strengthened the legal case against Morse, while demonstrating his commitment to peaceful resolution of conflicts. The crowd's mood shifted as evidence mounted against Morse and his associates. Fear gave way to anger, as families realized how extensively they had been manipulated and exploited. The supposed protector of their community had been its greatest threat all along. Morse's final gambit involved direct threats against anyone who testified against him. His desperation showed clearly as social and legal pressure destroyed his carefully maintained facade. The criminal beneath the respectable businessmen emerged for all to witness. Sheriff Bracken made his choice public by placing Morse under arrest for land fraud and intimidation of witnesses. The decision required moral courage that defined his character more clearly than years did not guarantee long-term acceptance from the community they called home. The trial of Jebediah Morse became the most significant legal proceeding in Copper Ridge's brief history. Evidence of systematic land fraud filled courtroom records as victim after victim testified about their experiences with forged documents and stolen property. The scope of his criminal enterprise shocked even seasoned lawmen. Sheriff Bracken's investigation revealed connections to corrupt officials across 3 territories. Morse's network had operated for nearly a decade, stealing land from both settlers and tribal communities through elaborate schemes disguised as legitimate business transactions. The financial damage totaled hundreds of thousands of dollars. Justice moved swiftly once the truth emerged. Morse received a 20-year prison sentence for fraud, theft, and intimidation. His associates faced similar consequences as the legal system dismantled their criminal organization piece by piece. Stolen properties returned to rightful owners throughout the region. Mariah's family received clear legal title to their homestead through a special territorial ruling that recognized both Samuel's Apache heritage and their good faith purchase of the property. The decision established precedent for resolving similar conflicts between tribal rights and settler claims. Samuel's mixed heritage transformed from a source of shame into a bridge between communities. His legal standing as both Apache descendant and territorial citizen provided unique protection under laws governing both jurisdictions. The child who had been vulnerable became empowered through his dual identity. Victoria Ashford emerged as an unlikely champion of racial tolerance in Copper Ridge. Her support during the crisis had revealed character that surprised many longtime residents. She used her social influence to gradually change attitudes about the family living by Red Creek. The transformation was not immediate or universal. Some townspeople maintained their prejudices despite overwhelming evidence of Morse's deception. However, enough minds changed to create an atmosphere where the family could live with dignity and relative safety. Ayanna, writing and arithmetic, met territorial standards for future opportunities. Years passed with surprising peace for the family that had once lived under constant threat. Samuel grew into a confident child, who moved easily between the Apache wisdom of his father and the practical knowledge his mother provided. His mixed heritage became a source of strength rather than vulnerability. The homestead by Red Creek flourished under their combined efforts. Ayanna's knowledge of desert farming techniques increased crop yields, while Mariah's business skills expanded their seamstress operation to serve customers from neighboring settlements. Prosperity replaced the poverty that had once defined their existence. Samuel's 6th birthday brought celebrations that would have been impossible during the early years of hiding and fear. Children from town joined Apache children from nearby tribal lands in games that transcended cultural boundaries. The party symbolized hope for a more unified future. Sheriff Bracken became an unexpected family friend through his continued protection of their legal rights. His evolution from suspicious lawman to supportive ally demonstrated how personal relationships could overcome initial prejudices. His own children played regularly with Samuel. Victoria Ashford's leadership in accepting the family influenced other prominent citizens to reconsider their attitudes about racial mixing and cultural differences. Her example showed that change was possible, even in communities with deeply entrenched social divisions. The seamstress shop evolved into a gathering place, where women from different backgrounds shared stories and supported each other through frontier hardships. Mariah's quiet dignity and practical wisdom earned respect that transcended racial boundaries among those who knew her personally. Ayanna found his place in the community through his skills as a tracker and guide for territorial officials. His knowledge of desert survival and Apache customs proved valuable for maintaining peaceful relations between settlers and tribal communities. Former enemies began seeking his expertise. Samuel started teaching other children basic Apache words during school recess. His patient explanations of his father's culture stood between his parents as they watched the sunrise paint the desert in shades of gold and crimson. His confident posture and bright eyes reflected the security of knowing exactly who he was and where he belonged in the world. The creek that had once marked the boundary of Mariah's isolation now flowed past a home where love had conquered hatred, where justice had defeated corruption, and where a child's laughter proved that different worlds could unite in harmony. Their story continued beyond that perfect morning, written in the lives they touched and the community they helped transform. What began as a single night of passion had evolved into a legacy of hope that would influence generations yet to come.